The FBI is now investigating them. Kash Patel drops bombshell on live TV, leaving Crockett and AOC stunned. The studio erupted in chaos. Kash Patel's voice thundered, "The FBI is investigating them." Gasps filled the air. The crowd roared. Jasmine Crockett's eyes widened in disbelief, her fists tightening. AOC's trademark smile disappeared, frozen in shock. Cameras whirred and flashed under the blinding lights as the tension went viral, instantly igniting a wildfire across social media. This was Face Off, the most explosive political talk show on television. Tonight's lineup was already electric. Jasmine Crockett, the razor-sharp Texas Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, New York's progressive powerhouse, and FBI Director Kash Patel, Trump loyalist and political juggernaut. The tension had been brewing for months. Crockett had once slammed Trump as a Doge-obsessed waster, setting off firestorms in the West Wing. Meanwhile, AOC had faced backlash from Queens community leaders accusing her of going silent during a crime surge, letters that somehow ended up on Patel's desk. Patel had long branded some Democrats as a potential internal threat. Now, with Crockett and AOC seated across from him on live television, he had the national stage, and he used it. His bombshell claim about an FBI investigation hit like a hammer, shaking the credibility of both Congresswomen. But before the debate could ignite, viewers were asked to comment their location and subscribe, because what was coming next wasn't just political theater, it was a reckoning. The lights in the studio dimmed, leaving only a soft spotlight on the center stage. Three powerful figures sat across from one another, like chess masters preparing their first moves. Then the theme music hit. From behind the curtain strode Vanessa Hart, poised, commanding, every syllable in her voice designed to draw viewers in. "Welcome to Face Off," she said, her voice crisp with resolve, "where uncomfortable truths come to light and no one walks away unchallenged." The audience applauded, but with a nervous energy, sensing the storm about to unfold. Vanessa's smile was sharp, almost surgical, as she introduced the guest with deliberate precision. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a fearless voice from Texas. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the progressive icon reshaping New York. And FBI Director Kash Patel, a man who likely knows more than anyone else in this room. The clapping resumed, slower this time. Measured. Cautious. Like an audience watching the opening moves of a high-stakes trial. Vanessa turned toward the trio. Her gaze swept across them like a scalpel ready to dissect. Then her tone dropped, heavier, like the sound of a gavel striking wood. "Let's begin." National security, always urgent, never settled, has once again taken center stage. But this time, the threat isn't foreign. It's domestic. It's political. And it just exploded on Face Off, the country's most combative political talk show. As the spotlight narrowed and tension crackled across the studio, host Vanessa Hart turned to FBI Director Kash Patel, her tone poised but piercing. "Mr. Patel, America lies awake not just because of foreign threats, but the dangers within. As Director of the FBI, how are you addressing internal threats? Are there concerns that hit closer to home? Maybe even at this very table?" A hush fell. All eyes locked onto Patel, silent, still, but exuding a controlled intensity. His gaze, glinting under studio lights, resembled that of a predator ready to strike. Then he spoke. "Thank you, Vanessa," Patel said coolly, his voice slicing through the air. "The greatest threats to America today come not only from overseas, but from within, from those who cloak radical agendas in the language of progress. The FBI is actively monitoring individuals, including Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, due to their affiliations with known extremist networks. The investigations are ongoing. The evidence is real." The studio gasped. Audience murmurs rose like wildfire. Crockett gripped the armrest of her chair, fury flashing in her eyes. AOC inhaled sharply, hands locked, her face unreadable but tense. Vanessa raised her hand to quiet the crowd, her professionalism unshaken. "Mr. Patel, that is a serious allegation." "Congresswoman Crockett, your response?" Crockett stood, her voice a thunderclap. "You come on this show and hurl accusations without a shred of proof? I'm a daughter of Dallas, raised in hardship, fighting for justice. If you've got files, present them now, or admit you're just a political pawn, doing Trump's dirty work." Her words struck hard, defiant, but in her eyes, a flicker of unease. Patel didn't flinch. He leaned back, eyes cold, voice drenched in condescension. "Congresswoman, the FBI does not act without evidence. We've logged meetings, intercepted communications, and tracked public appearances, like your presence at that Dallas rally calling for systemic upheaval. Your support for defunding the police? That's not reform. It's destabilization. His words were vague, but deadly, calculated to sow doubt and paint her as a threat without direct proof. Then AOC rose, her voice calm but edged like a blade. You're using the FBI as a political weapon, Mr. Patel. This isn't about protecting Americans, it's about silencing dissent. I've spent my career advocating for working families, for safety, for justice. If you have something real, release it. Otherwise, this is nothing but fear-mongering and slander. The progressive crowd erupted in applause. Patel smiled, a cold, surgical smile. The FBI doesn't publicly release active case details, he said, pausing for effect. But I will say this, we have documented calls, messages, and links to organizations that support near-violent ideologies. These congresswomen are no strangers to those circles. Our findings are progressing, and when we reveal what we know, America will be shaken. A heavy silence fell. It was as if a stone had been dropped into a still pond. Crockett's hands balled into fists, her anger now covering a deeper anxiety. AOC glanced sideways at her colleague, eyes steady but lips tight. The accusations, though unproven, lingered like a storm cloud, ominous, suffocating. Crockett stepped forward again, her voice blazing. You want to smear me? I built schools, created jobs, and fought for justice in my city. You call me the threat? Look in your own camp. Trump has torn this country apart. If you have evidence, show it. Otherwise, keep my name out of your lies. Her voice was powerful, but the slightest tremble gave away what was beneath, real fear of being targeted. AOC stayed composed but sharpened her message. This is authoritarianism 101, she said with chilling clarity. Targeting women of color with vague allegations isn't new. It's just the oldest playbook in politics. And we're not backing down. My work in Congress is fully transparent, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, her voice steady but sharp. My record is public, bills, votes, town halls. If you've got messages or files, show the nation. Otherwise, you're just deflecting from this administration's failures. Her words were deliberate, controlled, but the tension in her clenched fist betrayed the immense pressure swirling in the studio. Vanessa Hart, poised as ever, cut through the tension like a practiced anchor. Congresswoman Crockett, Mr. Patel has made direct claims about FBI surveillance. What is your response to these accusations? Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. I'm not afraid, she said, her voice rising like a battle cry. I've faced poverty, prejudice, and every attempt to silence me. Patel's lies won't break me. He picked the wrong woman. Her words rang with power, but behind her defiance, a flicker of concern crossed her eyes, as if bracing for something Patel had yet to reveal. AOC gave a slight nod, then followed up with calm resolve. My focus is on the people I serve, not conspiracies. These tactics won't work. We speak for truth. The American people will see through this charade. Across from them, Kash Patel sat motionless, his expression unreadable, like a grandmaster who had just made a calculated move. His silence was as sharp as any rebuttal. Crockett glanced sideways at AOC. They didn't speak, but their shared nod was unmistakable. They were cornered, but they were not defeated. The accusations of extremism and FBI surveillance had landed hard, designed to provoke fear, to erode public trust, and dominate the headlines. But in their eyes now burned something else, a renewed resolve to fight back. The energy in the studio crackled after the explosive exchange. Applause and whispers mixed with nervous glances, tension hovering in the air like smoke after a cannon blast. The stage lights softened to a golden hue, casting a quiet glow on the trio beneath the spotlight. It was a beautiful visual, but it couldn't dim the fire still simmering on set. Vanessa Hart returned to center stage, her stance like a calm storm front between political lightning bolts. Her voice resonated with both warmth and gravity. Thank you all for staying with us during this extraordinary first half, she said, her gaze scanning the room. Today, national security is not just about borders or classified briefings. It begins right outside our homes, in the streets where we live, and where our children play. She turned to Patel, slicing through the quiet with a deceptively gentle question. Mr. Patel, as FBI director, how do you assess the rising crime in areas like Dallas and Queens? Are local leaders, like the congresswomen with us today, part of the solution or part of the problem? Every breath in the studio paused. Cameras zoomed in. Patel leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his expression sharpening under the heat of the lights. A thin smile curved his lips, not of amusement, but intent. Thank you, Vanessa. He began smoothly, his tone like silk wrapped around steel. Let's be honest. Public safety in many of our cities is unraveling, and Dallas and Queens stand as prime examples. He let the moment hang. In Dallas, under Congresswoman Crockett's watch, we've seen spikes in economic instability and violent crime. Queens is no different. In fact, we've received direct outreach from residents, people who no longer trust their local officials. They turn to the FBI because they feel abandoned, because they believe Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has failed to act. He reclined slightly, locking eyes with the women across from him. If a lawmaker cannot secure her own district, how can she be trusted to speak on national security? The words dropped like a gavel. The studio fell into stunned silence. Crockett's jaw clenched, her fingers digging into the armrests. AOC shifted in her seat, her expression darkening, unreadable. The audience buzzed, some nodding in agreement, others murmuring in disbelief. Lines were being drawn. Allegiances tested. Crockett straightened in her chair, eyes blazing, her fingers tapping in a silent rhythm of resistance. She wasn't done yet, and neither was the fight. Beside her, AOC held her composure like steel, but the tight clench of her hands betrayed the pressure pressing down. Vanessa Hart, ever poised, raised a hand to still the studio's rising energy. Thank you, Director Patel. Congresswoman Crockett. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. The floor is yours. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, her voice calm but pulsing with restrained fire, like a river just beneath its banks. Mr. Patel, you talk about Dallas like you've lived it, like you've walked our streets. I've secured millions for schools, jobs, and public safety. Yes, we face crime. Every community does. But the real damage comes from Trump-era policies like DOGE, draining local resources and gutting support systems. She paused, her voice tightening. If you're looking for someone to blame, start with your reflection. Her words hit like a gust of wind from a stormy Dallas night, charged with the memory of community meetings, late-night vigils, and trying to calm families in fear. Patel smirked, eyes gleaming with smugness. Blaming Trump won't hide the numbers, he countered. Dallas is drowning in crime. Businesses are closing. Your police reforms? A dodge when people are begging for safety. That's not leadership. That's evasion. He pivoted sharply to AOC, voice rising with precision. And as for Queens, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, your constituents are writing directly to us. I have those letters. They say they feel abandoned, that you've done nothing to keep them safe. And I've heard it firsthand. AOC stood, her tone a quiet blade cloaked in grace. You mentioned Queens, Mr. Patel, but you haven't stepped foot in it. I've fought for youth programs, funded safety initiatives, and supported families on the ground. Crime is complex. There's no single villain. But do you know what makes it worse? Slashed federal funding, reckless cuts, and abandoned cities, brought on by your administration. She leaned in, eyes locked. And those letters you reference? I've met every single writer. We're acting. You're just exploiting their pain to make headlines. Her words, calm and cutting, painted a vivid contrast of walking the gritty streets, shaking hands with struggling residents, and fighting for real solutions. Patel's response was as cold as it was calculated. It's very clear. We've received complaint after complaint from both your districts. In Queens, citizens live in fear while Miss Ocasio-Cortez delivers speeches. In Dallas, crime surges while Miss Crockett clings to broken policy. If you can't protect your neighborhoods, you don't deserve to speak for America. The sentence struck like a dagger, sharp, personal, and deliberate. Crockett fired back, her voice igniting into controlled fury. You don't know Dallas, Patel? I've opened community centers, created jobs, worked with police to rebuild trust. You want to talk about cuts? You and your team stripped our budgets, then blamed us for the wreckage. Don't pretend to care when all you've done is try to break us. There was heat in her words, but also weariness, her eyes still haunted by the earlier accusations of extremism. AOC followed, steady as ever, her voice smooth and firm like a river current. Queens is in my blood. I fight for it every single day. We've seen crime drop in key areas because we're doing the work. But we need time and support, which your administration keeps taking away. You mentioned letters? I've listened. I've acted. You're not here to help. You're here to weaponize their pain to destroy me. As the tension rose, the lighting in the studio shifted. Soft blue hues wrapped the stage in a velvet glow, but the atmosphere remained charged, electric, and thick with unspoken fire. Vanessa Hart stepped forward once more, center stage. Her voice, measured and composed, cut through the static like a professional blade honed by years in the field. The room waited, because the storm wasn't over. Vanessa Hart's voice rang out with practiced authority, each word crisp, deliberate, and designed to steady the storm. "We've tackled national security," she began, "a pillar of every democracy. But in today's world, safety isn't shaped by laws alone. It's shaped by how information is shared, consumed, and weaponized." She paced slightly to the left, facing her guests as her voice deepened into analysis. Media was once a bridge between people and truth. Today, that bridge can fracture under the weight of bias, fear, and spin. It can divide, but it can also heal, provoke dialogue, and rebuild trust. She paused, brief, intentional, then turned her gaze directly on Kash Patel. "Mr. Patel, as director of an agency that exists under constant public scrutiny, how do you assess the media's impact on public trust? And in that media landscape, do Congresswomen Crockett and Ocasio-Cortez restore faith in truth or fracture it?" Patel's eyes gleamed. A flicker of a smile played at his lips, not warm, but calculating. "Thank you, Vanessa," he said smoothly, his voice a sharp edge wrapped in silk. "Let's be honest, the media has become a battlefield. And Miss Crockett and Miss Ocasio-Cortez? They're seasoned tacticians. They use platforms like CNN, MSNBC, social media, anything to craft an image that hides the real failures happening in Dallas and Queens." He turned his gaze toward Crockett. "She turns political crisis into talk show entertainment. I've seen her on The Late Show, spinning suffering into sound bites. That's not leadership, that's distraction." Jasmine Crockett stood, her voice thunderous and sure, like a storm crashing ashore. "You call it spin? I call it truth. I went on The Late Show to give Dallas a voice, to talk about families surviving Trump's wreckage. And let's not pretend you're innocent, Patel. You and your administration cozy up to Fox News, pushing extremist smears like the one you just tried earlier tonight." She stepped forward, her words fierce but grounded. "I use media to connect, to tell hard truths. You use it to divide. Don't lecture me about integrity while you peddle propaganda." The crowd stirred, some in applause, others in unease. Patel smirked. "You call it truth, but the public sees through it. You stir emotions and dodge facts. You're just as posed to rile up the streets, not calm them." He pivoted toward AOC, his tone growing colder. "And you, Congresswoman, everything you do is broadcasted like a performance. Live streams, viral posts, they may rack up views, but they haven't fixed a thing in Queens." AOC rose slowly, her eyes alight with fire, her voice soft but razor-sharp. "Mr. Patel, don't talk about media manipulation like you're not playing the same game. I use social media to speak directly to the people I serve. I share policy. I answer questions. I fight for Queens." She stepped closer, gaze unwavering. "You talk about division? Look in the mirror. Your administration slashes aid, then weaponizes media to attack the very people left to clean up the mess. The media can be a bridge, but you've made it a weapon." Patel tilted his head slightly, studying them like pieces on a board. "Both of you know how to use the spotlight. You shape narratives, polish your public image, while real problems grow worse. The public isn't blind. They know Dallas and Queens are failing. And they know who's been in charge." His words were aimed not just at the women before him, but at the viewers watching at home. Crockett's voice reignited, fierce, defiant, but composed. "You talk about image, but all I've done is fight for the people of Dallas, open community centers, bring in jobs, rebuild trust with police. You and your party cut us off, then point fingers. Don't pretend to care about our cities when your goal is to dismantle them." AOC followed, her tone serene but laced with power. "I use media to uplift my district, to explain complex policy and build trust. You use it to smear and distract. If we want truth, let's start by holding your administration accountable for what it's destroyed." Her voice carried memories of live streams on late nights in Queens, speaking directly to voters, answering tough questions, never hiding. The studio lights dimmed to a warm amber, casting a rich, cinematic glow over the stage. But it wasn't enough to cool the heat now radiating from the center of the debate. Vanessa Hart stepped forward again, the poised conductor of chaos, voice steady and resonant. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, scanning the crowd and the cameras, "in today's world, media is no longer just a mirror, it's a lens that reframes our reality. It defines how we see leaders, policies, and the truth itself. She turned, gaze landing on the three guests, locked in a triangle of fire and tension. And tonight, that lens is watching all of us. Vanessa Hart's voice cut through the tension with precision, her tone rising with purpose. We've heard compelling perspectives on national security, the backbone of any stable society. But stability is only the beginning. What comes next is reform policy changes that shape justice, healthcare, and opportunity for every citizen. She turned, locking eyes with the guests at center stage, her voice sharpening like a scalpel. Mr. Patel, as FBI director observing societal shifts at the federal level, how do you assess the influence of current reform policies, particularly in healthcare and criminal justice? And in your view, what roles have Congresswoman Crockett and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez played in shaping or obstructing those reforms? Kash Patel didn't hesitate. His voice, calm but honed like a blade, sliced through the air. Progressive reforms from Miss Crockett and Miss Ocasio-Cortez are not solutions. They're ideological illusions. Justice reform, universal healthcare. This isn't compassion, it's socialism in disguise. These policies weaken our economy, compromise national security, and plunge our institutions into chaos. He turned sharply toward Crockett. Miss Crockett calls for defunding police. Look at the rising crime in Dallas. And Miss Ocasio-Cortez? Her free healthcare plans sound good until you realize who foots the bill. Hardworking Americans crushed by higher taxes and inflation. He scoffed. I've seen the speeches, the live streams, the posts. They promise utopia, but deliver instability. Crockett stood, her voice surging like a tidal wave, firm and unshakable. Mr. Patel, you call it socialism, I call it justice. I never called to defund the police. I called for accountability, fairness, and safer communities. What you fail to mention is that you and your administration gutted the very funding cities like Dallas rely on to survive. She stepped forward, fire in her voice. You dare speak of chaos? Chaos is what happens when mothers can't get their children medical care, when kids fear policemen to protect them. My policies are built from the voices of the people. Don't lecture me about order while your administration takes joyrides with Doge and hosts golf weekends on the taxpayer's dime. Her words stirred the crowd, memories of town halls, community forums, and sleepless nights fighting for vulnerable families pulsed behind every syllable. Patel's smile returned, smug and cutting. You can call it justice, Congresswoman, but the results speak louder. Dallas is paying the price. Crime is climbing, trust is falling. You weaken the institutions that keep people safe. He then turned his gaze to AOC, his tone now openly mocking. And Miss Ocasio-Cortez, your vision of universal healthcare is poetic, but detached from reality. Your social posts sell a dream of free everything. But who pays? American workers, drowning under taxes. That's not leadership, it's fantasy. AOC rose slowly. Her eyes sparked with defiance, but her voice was calm, like a breeze before a storm. Mr. Patel, you call basic healthcare a fantasy. I call it a moral obligation. In Queens, I meet people who have to choose between insulin and dinner. That's not freedom, it's neglect. And your administration? It's built on indifference. She stepped forward, her voice firm, resonant. You say my ideas are delusional? I say leaving Americans to suffer is criminal. Healthcare isn't a luxury, it's a right. And if you think fighting for dignity makes me a radical, then so be it. The studio fell silent for a beat, then murmurs and applause spread through the audience like a wave. The heat between the guests radiated stronger than ever. Under the warm amber glow of the stage lights, Vanessa Hart stepped forward once more, her presence calm but commanding. In this era, policy isn't just debated in halls of power, it's lived on the streets, in hospitals, in neighborhoods where everyday Americans feel the weight of every decision made on their behalf. She turned to the three figures locked in ideological battle. And tonight, we're seeing just how much is at stake. My policies invest in people, not corporations, AOC declared, her voice steady, slicing through the tension. You talk about taxes? Look at the windfalls billionaires got under Trump. The media can spin anything, but numbers don't lie. Universal healthcare saves money long-term. She paused, her voice now edged with urgency. You want to talk about chaos? Chaos is what your administration created, when you abandoned workers and let families in Queens choose between insulin and groceries. Her words, sharp and unyielding, carried the weight of countless town halls and kitchen table conversations with desperate families. Patel's eyes narrowed, gleaming like a predator waiting for his strike. Miss Crockett and Miss Ocasio-Cortez sell illusions, he said coolly. Justice reform that cripples security. Healthcare plans that hollow out the economy. The American people see through it. They don't want socialism. They want safety. And the FBI has a duty to shield this country from policies that threaten its foundation. His words landed like arrows, aimed squarely at the trust of the nation. Crockett responded with fire. You want to talk about danger, Patel? Your administration leaves Dallas drowning in poverty while Trump throws money at Doge and golf carts. She leaned forward, voice rising with resolve. I fight for the forgotten, for justice that uplifts the people the system has ignored. That's not socialism. That's called humanity. The tension in the room deepened, her voice a battle cry carrying echoes of late-night community meetings and policy fights for survival. AOC stood beside her, calm but commanding. My policies are for Queens. For the workers your administration left behind. Healthcare isn't a fantasy, it's reality in most developed nations. If you really want to protect America, start with its people, not Trump's interests. Her tone was piercing but even, strengthened by memories of endless days pushing legislation on Capitol Hill. Patel reclined slightly in his chair, his fingers interlocked, his expression cold and calculated. He scanned the two congresswomen like a general confident in his final move. Emotions don't excuse weak policies, he said. Noble intentions don't erase dangerous consequences. When you legislate, you aren't writing slogans, you're shaping outcomes. And no matter how loud the rhetoric, the FBI will continue to protect this republic, even against those who attack it from within. A murmur rippled through the audience, uncertain, unsettled. Then came the sharp crackle of a microphone. Crockett leaned in, her voice cutting through the silence like tempered steel. Don't lecture me on responsibility, Mr. Patel. Not when your administration lets people die for lack of medicine, hospitals, or housing. I don't write promises, I deliver on them. You can call it socialism. But to a single mother in South Dallas, it's her only shot at hope. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then growing. AOC stepped forward, not waiting for the noise to fade. Her voice was quiet, yet it carried like a drumbeat of truth. The FBI isn't your tool, Mr. Patel. It's meant to serve justice, not protect power. If ensuring health care, food, and equal justice is dangerous, then maybe your definition of safety is the real problem. Because what we're fighting for is what America actually deserves. The spotlight dimmed to a rich amber, casting long shadows across the stage. Vanessa Hart returned to center, poised as always, her presence steady as a lighthouse amid the storm. Her voice dropped to a reverent tone, slow, measured, powerful. 3 voices, 3 worldviews, 1 nation at a crossroads. In today's America, people aren't just watching, they're deciding. Reform or tradition, bold action or careful stability. She turned, acknowledging each of the guests with a respectful nod. One thing is certain, dialogue is the bridge we can't afford to burn. And in that dialogue, sometimes it's not the answer that matters most, but the courage to ask the question. She looked into the camera, her eyes full of gravity. And tonight, the questions were loud enough to echo far beyond this stage. As the face-off theme music swelled and the lights dimmed to a cool, muted hue, the tension in the studio still hung heavy in the air. Audience members slowly began to rise, and cameras swept across the faces of the guests, Crockett still fierce, eyes burning with quiet defiance, AOC staring directly into the lens, reflective and resolute. Vanessa Hart, ever composed, offered one final smile to the viewers. Her voice dropped in tone, carrying the weight of the moment like a closing argument to the nation. I'm Vanessa Hart. Thank you for watching Face Off. See you next week, where truth, once again, takes the stage. The show ended. But across the country, the political storm was only just beginning. Within hours, a viral clip rocketed across social media. FBI Director Kash Patel accusing Congresswomen Jasmine Crockett and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of links to extremist groups, suggesting both were under federal investigation. The moment ignited a firestorm. Newsrooms lit up. Commentary flooded in. The face-off set became the unlikely epicenter of a nationwide ideological clash. Conservative media led the charge. Fox News replayed Patel's accusation on a loop, a bold red cheer and screaming. Kash Patel exposes Democrat danger. One anchor, voice gleeful, framed Crockett and AOC as symbols of progressive failure, pointing to rising crime in Dallas and Queens, calling justice reform anti-police, and mocking AOC's healthcare advocacy as utopian fantasy. YouTube comment sections exploded with praise for Patel, Patel is a patriot. The FBI needs to release the files now. Meanwhile, liberal networks responded with urgency. CNN and MSNBC aired passionate defenses of the two congresswomen, accusing Patel of abusing his position to smear political opponents. One MSNBC host, eyes heavy with concern, called it modern-day McCarthyism. They replayed Crockett's fiery rebuttal, her voice rising like a wave, as she pushed back against the extremist label with stories from Dallas communities. A panelist criticized Patel's lack of evidence, calling the attack a disgraceful attempt to discredit women of color in power. AOC's calm but pointed response aired in full. She criticized Trump-era budget cuts and warned viewers that Patel's vague threats could undermine trust in government. Liberal commentators called her a voice of reason in a room full of noise, but acknowledged the damage might already be done. But the public wasn't just divided. It was fractured. On platforms like YouTube and X, formerly Twitter, independent voices took a more cautious approach. One well-known political analyst posted a long-form breakdown. In his video, he questioned whether Patel had any solid evidence or whether this was all political theater. He referenced the Queen's leadership letter mentioned during the debate, noting that some voters did seem disillusioned with AOC. Regarding Crockett, he acknowledged her passion for justice reform but criticized her for not addressing Dallas's growing economic concerns. Yet even he admitted Patel's extremism claim lacked proof and urged the FBI to release clear findings or say nothing. His video drew tens of thousands of comments from across the political spectrum. They're all performing. Patel needs to show receipts or sit down. In her D.C. office, Jasmine Crockett scrolled through the media frenzy. One article labeled her a cheerleader for chaos. Another dug up an old clip from a Dallas rally. Her jaw tightened. She remembered that night, standing on a stage in front of grieving families, promising justice for sons and daughters lost to violence. The memory made her fists clench. The smear, baseless as it was, had planted seeds of doubt. One of her aides stepped in quietly, face tense. Voters in Dallas are divided. Some still back you. Others, well, they're buying into the socialist narrative. Crockett took a long breath. She wouldn't let this define her. Not now. Not like this. Across the country, in New York, AOC faced the same storm. Alone in her apartment, she opened her phone and saw two realities. #AOC Stand Strong was trending. But so were sharp criticisms, comments from Queen's voters echoing the concerns Patel weaponized during the debate. A flash of memory hit her, a tense community meeting, constituents voicing fear over crime. Their disappointment still echoed in her mind. It tightened something in her chest. CNN had just aired a glowing profile of her, calling her the future of the Democratic Party. But even that segment ended with a warning. Patel's accusation, if allowed to fester unchecked, could chip away at her national influence. The debate was over, but the fallout had only just begun. Truth, perception, and power now battled not in the studio, but in headlines, hashtags, and living rooms across America. And somewhere beneath it all, between the noise, the narratives, and the name-calling, millions of Americans were still waiting for answers. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stared at her phone, her expression set with determination, as if preparing for a possible 2028 presidential run. The political firestorm from Face Off hadn't ended with the closing credits. It spilled far beyond television screens and social media feeds, reaching deep into the heart of America, into the dusty streets of Dallas and the crowded avenues of Queens. There, in the communities that had elected Jasmine Crockett and AOC to Congress, residents were now grappling with a new question. Could they still trust their leaders? Or had Kash Patel's accusations of extremism planted seeds of doubt that were too toxic to ignore? In the days following the broadcast, those questions sparked a chaotic chorus, equal parts loyalty and skepticism, that reflected the deep political fracture running through the country. Dallas, ground zero for a divided conversation at a modest community center tucked away in South Dallas. The fluorescent lights flickered as neighbors packed into a multi-purpose room. Some stood, others leaned against plastic folding tables, all there to discuss what they'd seen on TV. Maria, a single mother with her hair neatly tied back, stood tall in the crowd. Her voice quivered with emotion, but her words rang with conviction. "Jasmine is our warrior," she said. "She brought us schools and jobs when the federal government turned its back. When Trump cut funding, she stood up." Patel's lying. He doesn't know a thing about Dallas. Around her, supporters nodded in agreement. A few held up their phones, replaying clips of Crockett's defiant rebuttal to Patel during the debate. But not everyone in the room was convinced. Henry, a local auto shop owner, sat quietly in the corner, watching the same clip, Patel accusing Crockett of ties to extremist groups. When he finally spoke, his voice was hesitant but firm. "I support Jasmine." "I really do," he said. "But what if Patel's not completely wrong? Dallas is hurting. Businesses are shutting down. We can't afford more risk." His words created an uneasy silence. Some attendees began scrolling through Patel's posts on X, formerly Twitter, eyes flickering between loyalty and doubt. Outside City Hall, the tension became more visible. A small but passionate protest formed. Supporters waved signs reading "Stand with Jasmine," while across the street, counter-protesters held banners demanding security over reform. The media narrative only deepened the divide. Fox News doubled down, branding Crockett as a cheerleader for chaos, while her loyal base tried to drown out the criticism with online support. In quieter corners of the city, business owners met behind closed doors, fearing that Crockett's progressive label and her rising national profile might scare away future investment. "I'm worried," one said. "Justice reform sounds good on TV, but look around. We're paying the price on the ground." Still, voices of support remained loud and clear. A local teacher posted to X, "Jasmine brings hope to our schools. Don't let Patel's smear campaign divide us." Queens, praise and pressure in New York. Similar tensions rippled through AOC's district. A group of women marched through Astoria holding signs thanking AOC for her fight for healthcare reform. One held up a poster that read, "Healthcare is a right, not a privilege." But on a local news station, a well-known community leader voiced a growing concern. "She's too focused on social media. We need her on the ground, not just online." The criticism echoed Patel's jab during the debate, that AOC was more influencer than legislator. Crockett returns to the people back in Dallas. Jasmine Crockett entered a packed community hall, eyes sharp but heavy with fatigue. She sat at a round table where both Maria and Henry were waiting. Maria grabbed her hand first, tearfully reaffirming her faith. "You're still our voice," she whispered. Then came Henry. He didn't speak right away, his expression troubled. When he finally did, it was measured. "I just don't want Dallas to fall further behind," he said. "You've done a lot. But people are scared." Crockett nodded, took a breath, and looked both of them in the eyes. "I hear you. I'm not walking away. I'll keep fighting, no matter what Patel says. This city deserves truth, not fear." The political fallout continues in Washington and New York. In Dallas and Queens, the battle wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about perception, about narrative, about who the public would believe. For AOC and Crockett, the road ahead would be uphill. The accusations were baseless, but the doubt was real. And they knew that public trust, once cracked, is one of the hardest things to rebuild. But both women, seasoned, scarred, and unyielding, weren't backing down. Because for the communities they represent, retreat was never an option. Though she stood tall before her supporters, a flicker of worry passed through AOC's eyes as she scanned headlines branding her dangerous. In Queens, concern spread like wildfire. Local leaders, including Rosa, had called an urgent community meeting. AOC addressed them, her voice steady but vulnerable. "I'm here for you," she said, gently but firmly. Yet even as she spoke, her phone buzzed with alerts, #Queens deserves better trending on X. The memory of past promises replayed in her mind, nights spent listening to constituents, pledging change. Now, she clenched her fists, silently vowing to earn back every ounce of trust. In both Dallas and Queens, voters were conflicted. Crockett and AOC remained pillars in their communities, but Patel's accusation had cast a long shadow. On X, the comments were divided like shards of a fractured mirror. Crockett is a warrior. AOC needs action, not just words. Across neighborhoods, tension simmered like a fire not yet extinguished. Community events, small-scale protests, and social media posts continued to amplify the storm. Despite the noise, both Congresswomen stood firm, eyes unwavering, spirits unbroken. But the greatest challenge wasn't Patel. It was the slow, uncertain task of rebuilding public trust. The lingering impact of an accusation. Though Patel offered no clear evidence, his vague extremist allegations had left a mark. In a media-saturated world, the damage didn't need proof. It needed only repetition. The image of Jasmine Crockett and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, once symbols of bold leadership, now flickered in and out of doubt among constituents. In Dallas, a loyal but anxious community looked to Crockett for clarity. She stood before them, recalling every meeting, every promise of justice. Now she faced questions she hadn't expected, from people once unwavering in their support. In Queens, AOC quietly reviewed her social media feed, scrolling past angry hashtags and conflicting reactions. She remembered the long nights spent in meetings, listening to stories of hardship. Those stories had shaped her, but now, some questioned whether she was still truly listening. And far away, in a polished federal office, Kash Patel stood before a wide glass window. The city sprawled beneath him like a political chessboard. A fresh report lay in his hand, its cover marked with the red stamp of classification. He smiled, not with joy, but with calculation. He understood something fundamental about American politics. Control the narrative. Control the fear. Win the game. The Face-Off Fallout. A Mirror of America, the explosive Face-Off episode, featuring Crockett, AOC, and Patel, was more than a televised debate. It was a vivid snapshot of America's deepening polarization. Patel's unfounded extremist claims, his critiques of Dallas and Queens, and his branding of progressive policies as socialist threats highlighted a disturbing trend: how language, not facts, increasingly shapes public opinion. In the aftermath, media outlets from Fox News to MSNBC inflamed both sides. On one channel, Crockett was a cheerleader for chaos. On another, she was a voice for the voiceless. AOC was either a savvy changemaker or a distracted influencer. The truth became secondary to the emotional power of the narrative. For many Americans, objective truth was harder to grasp than ever. What we can learn through it all, Crockett and AOC didn't retreat. Their resilience was undeniable. But their journey also showed the high cost of public service in an age of weaponized narratives. Patel's strategy wasn't new, but it was effective. Throw out an accusation, let it take root, and let public imagination fill in the blanks. So what's the lesson? In a polarized society, critical thinking must be our defense. Voters must ask for proof, not just powerful words. As Crockett demanded, show the evidence. Learn from AOC, who uses digital platforms to speak directly to her constituents, but also be aware that social media can distort reality as easily as it can build connection. And remember the voices from Dallas and Queens, ordinary citizens reminding us that trust in leadership should be based not just on rhetoric, but on real action, community meetings, delivered promises, tangible change. Want to follow what happens next? Subscribe to our channel to stay updated as Jasmine, Crockett, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez confront Patel's narrative, defend their records, and continue their fight for justice and trust in America's most divided era. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time when the truth steps back into the spotlight.